Hey, hey, it's Sunday, the sun is shining. Weirdly has been intermittently snowing, but that's spring, you know, that happens. This week we are making something that really does signify that summer is on its way, and it is a shortcake with cherries and cream. You might call it a scone maybe where you're from, or a shortcake. Whichever it is, it's absolutely delicious. And yeah, it really just makes you feel like summer is coming. I made this one with cherries, but you can do it with whatever you want. Strawberries, blueberries, I mean, anything. It's absolutely incredible. We're gonna learn how to make this amazing lamination, and it's super simple. It doesn't take very long to whip up, and it just tastes absolutely amazing. So let's skip forward onto the recipe, and we'll learn how to make these gorgeous little cherry shortcakes. So as always, the mise en place, the prep, the preparation, the getting the things ready, that's what we need to do to make these things work and go a little bit faster. So always weigh out your ingredients and get your oven on. So for this recipe, the oven needs to go on to 200 degrees. So we'll get that on. And then before we mix everything, before we start doing anything, we get it all weighed out. All of the quantities and the recipe are on my website. The link's in the description box down below. So if you're ever unsure, you can just head straight there. Maybe visuals aren't your thing and reading makes it a lot easier. So that's where you can go to get them all. But what we need is 240 grams of flour and 100 grams of caster sugar. They can go together. And then I've got just under 1 teaspoon of salt and 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. They are also going in. We've got 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, so that also goes in. And then the other thing we need is 115 grams of cubed butter, and we need 80 mils of cream and 115 grams. Apologies for getting distracted. It's just started snowing. Maybe I'm going to show you guys. I was hoping to hang some laundry outside today, but evidently that will not be happening. Anyways, let's get back to this. So then we need 80 mils of cream and 115 grams of sour cream. You could, with this recipe, you could alternate the cream maybe with some buttermilk or some yogurt. It would also work well, but I like the sour cream. Gives it a little bit of a different tang to the mix. So what we're going to do first is we're going to get a whisk and we're going to whisk this all together. So we want to make sure that all them things are well combined before we start rubbing in the butter. And what I'm going to do is just put that all in a bigger bowl, as it makes it much easier to deal with. And then we've got our butter. So this needs to be fridge cold, and we're going to add it in. Now, unlike when you make short crust pastry where you want it to become breadcrumbs, with this you do still want a little bit of texture, because that butter is going to create the air when it puffs up. So if there are like little bigger, slightly larger lumps of it, it makes it a little bit better. So I'll show you in a minute what I mean. But get them all coated and then just start breaking them up. So you can see here I'm kind of smushing it between my fingers and my hands, because I don't want a super fine crumb. I still want these little kind of pieces that look a bit more like this in the mix, because like I said, that is where we're gonna get them little bits of puffing up. You just need to make sure that there are no massive lumps like this one. We want to make sure that they are broken up. So what you're going to end up with is something a bit more like this. So as you can see, it's not, some of it is breadcrumbs, but there's also still lumps of that butter left in there, you know, like this. So as the name would suggest, short is referring to the texture of the cake, scone, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to, you know, it being tough. We are going to take the cream and the sour cream, and we're just going to whisk that together so that it's all mixed up. And this is where you can see it kind of has that buttermilk texture. We're going to add that in, get that all in there. And then just with the spatula, we're just going to slightly fold it together, but we're going to be very gentle. We're just going to make sure that there's not any massive amounts of wet. We'll scrape that off, get that in there. And now what you want to do with this is we're just going to combine it with our hands, very little work, into a dough. And you'll see it just comes together, and just squash it. Pick up all of that flour and onto the side. Get all of them bits out. Get them all off of your fingers. Pop this guy to one side. And what you want to do now is squash it together, and we're going to squash it into a square. Something like that. We'll get our pile of flour ready so that we can put some on the rolling pin and some on the side so it doesn't thoroughly stick. So we're just going to move that square slightly, put a little bit underneath and a little bit on top, because like I said, we don't want it to stick to the table. Squash it into a square, and then we're going to cut it into 4. 1, 2. So like that, into quarters. And then sit these on top of one another, and we're going to push them back down. And this is going to create some lamination in your dough. Just pop a touch more flour under there. And then we want to squash it out. Keep squashing. We can gently use a rolling pin. One that way. And then we want to make a rectangle so it's long. Make sure it's even on the edges, like that. And then we're going to go down the middle and into 3. And the same here, into 3. But what we're going to do first is we're going to sit them on a tray with some baking paper. We're going to sprinkle some sugar on the top, and then we're going to put them in the freezer for 10 minutes to solidify it all, so that then when they go into the oven, they don't melt, they puff up. They puff straight up. Them nuggets of butter pushing up. It's going to be great. So here they are, all sat in the tray, and a bit of greaseproof paper, and I'm just going to sprinkle the tops with some sugar, and they're going into the freezer for 10 minutes, but make sure you put your alarm on. You don't want them in there any longer because you don't want it actually freezing, you just want it to chill. So in they go, and then we'll be back in a minute. So they've come out the freezer, they're a little bit more set, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to cook them on this side of the baking tray. So this is a really good little hack if you don't have a flat baking tray, because obviously you don't want something with sides because then the heat can't get to it. So you want to make sure that they can sit proud on the top. So this is a really great way to do it if you haven't got a nice big flat baking tray with no edges. So these are going to go in for 20 minutes, and while they're on, we're going to make the cherry compote. So now to the cherry compote. Doesn't have to be cherry. What would be amazing? Fresh strawberries, frozen blueberries, absolutely anything. If it's the time of year when you can get them fresh, even better. Even cherries, fresh, amazing. But not the time of the year here. So I've actually gone for some frozen cherries. And here I've just popped them in the microwave for just a minute, just to defrost them. And now we're gonna put them in a pan. We're gonna add a little bit of sugar, and we're just gonna slowly cook them out. A little bit of lemon juice, and we're just going to thicken them up a little bit so that we can pour them all over the shortcake when it comes out of the oven. So I've got 250 grams of frozen cherries, not quite a tablespoon of sugar, and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Now what would be amazing as well, if you had a lemon, the zest could go into the shortcakes, to the scones. I mean, that would just be incredible. Just add that extra zing to it, and then you could use some of the juice for your compote. But we don't always have it, so you know, this stuff that comes in the packets, usually in the cold section in the supermarket, is really great because it's real lemons and is just as good, and is a hell of a lot cheaper than buying lemons when they're out of season and sometimes not that juicy. So you know, Win-win. And we're just going to pop this on the stove and just let it cook down for a little bit so that the juice here becomes a little bit thicker. So they've just come out of the oven. They've had 25 minutes. And as you can see, they've got that lamination all down the sides from that butter expanding. And they've got a lovely golden colour. So we'll just let them cool down for 10 to 15 minutes and then we can serve them up. And then we have here the cherry compote. You can see that when it was boiling, then bubbles became thicker, meaning that this juice has got thicker. It's much thicker than it was. And I didn't stir them too much so that the cherries keep their integrity, because obviously when they're frozen, they do have a tendency to break up a little bit. And then the only other thing that we need to do is our cream. So I've got 1 cup of cream. I'm just going to give it a tiny little splash of lemon juice, and that will actually help it thicken. Personal preference, icing sugar. Now you can put in as much or as little as you wish. I'm just going to put in, again, a little tiny dusting. Probably not even half a tablespoon, just to give it a little tiny bit of sweetness. And we're just going to whisk that up until we get to stiff peaks, and then we can just sit that in the fridge. And then when the shortcakes have cooled, we can serve it up. Oh, damn it. We'll try one more time. That was a good one. So our cream is beautifully whipped and nice stiff peaks. And then here's our little shortcake. As you can see on top there, from the butter being cold, and it's like split and caused these little air holes. So then when you cut inside, you have these wonderfully beautiful short areas where there's lamination, you see? Like this bit isn't stuck to this bit, and that just makes for a really short, wonderful texture on your shortcake. And it's just so light and fluffy. It's just incredible. And so the best way to serve it up then is we just have a nice dollop of that lemony sweet cream and a few of them gorgeous cherries on top with a little bit of their juice. And that there is just delicious and perfect, like a gorgeous little spring treat. This top is just, I mean, it's fallen apart. Look, it's like separating. That lamination in there is just, oh my God, absolutely incredible. A laminated scone or a laminated shortcake, whatever you call it, truly is so delicious. You just get this amazing texture that you don't get when you just roll it out, and it's just quite dense. That packing them on top of each other and then squashing them out gently really does provide you with just something so much better. And like I said in the beginning, it really does signal that summer is on its way. And you know what? If wherever you are, winter's on its way, you can make it more wintry. You could make like a pumpkin spiced cream, which would be absolutely amazing, and then put loads of like warming allspice into the mix, and you would have something that was really autumnal. It's so versatile and so incredible, and it really can be interchanged anyway. So let's give this thing a taste, shall we? I'll actually get into it, not just pick it apart like usual. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of that cream and a little bit of them cherries. Oh my God. It's so delicious. That cake is so light and so fantastic. And what's really nice is with that little bit of sugar on top, you get a crunch, but there's little bits that end up on the tray as well. So you end up with things like, let's see if I've got one. So you end up with things like this, where it goes like crisp and crunchy in the corner too. It's such an easy recipe. It's absolutely delicious, and I think all of you should try it. Make it this Sunday. Have a lovely little end to your Sunday dinner or Sunday lunch. If you're ever looking for any of my recipes, you can just go to my website. It's in the description box down below, and it gives you an easy to look at recipe. Do you know what else is really great about this? Is the salt in it. The salt balances out that sweetness, so you almost get a little bit of savoury too. It's really absolutely fantastic. If you've enjoyed this recipe, give me a little like, or maybe even subscribe, and that way you'll never miss out on any bangers that are coming your way. So I'm going to go have a little bit of afternoon tea and eat this absolutely delicious shortcake and get into that absolutely delicious crunchy lid. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. Please give them a go, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.